This is insane. Letitia James got famous for taking down some powerful players. Cuomo, Trump. She built her brand on accountability, but now she's looking like the final boss of political hypocrisy. A alleged sexual harassment case that went down just a couple of years ago back in 2022. And get this, she didn't say a damn thing until after she got reelected. And why is that timing such a big deal? Because this wasn't some random scandal. This was about her right-hand man, and the accusations were very serious. And if it came out during the election, it could have tanked her campaign. Voters would have questioned everything she stood for, especially after building her entire rep on exposing others for the exact same behavior. That's why critics say that she buried it. It was about protecting her image, her power, and her next move, not the victims. Let's get into it.
Now to a developing story tonight. Stunning allegations against Attorney General Tish James of New York that when a top aide was accused of sexual harassment, she kept quiet.
Some say that she's handling it far differently than her aggressive investigation of former Governor Andrew Cuomo. CBS 2 political reporter Marcia Kramer here in studio with more on this story. Marcia?
Well, Christina Maurice, the charges are coming from one of the women whose allegations of sexual harassment led to the resignation of the Attorney General's closest aide, her longtime chief of staff. She raises many questions about how the case was handled, and others have wondered why the Attorney General waited until after she won re-election to make the case public.
So you see this right here. It is starting very spicy. Tish James went completely mute on her own top guy out there allegedly being way too handsy at political fundraisers. But the same person, Letitia James, went full smackdown on Cuomo. Where was the same energy when it was happening under your own roof? In 2021, then governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, was facing multiple accusations of sexual harassment and being a total creep. 11 women in total. These weren't just rumors. James' office led the investigation that confirmed the claims, dropped a big, massive 165-page report, and turned political opinion into political napalm.
The investigators independently corroborated and substantiated these facts through interviews and evidence, including contemporaneous notes and communications. This evidence will be made available to the public along with the report. This investigation was started after a number of women publicly alleged that they had been sexually harassed by Governor Cuomo. Governor Cuomo sexually harassed current and former state employees in violation of both federal and state laws. The independent investigation found that Governor Cuomo sexually harassed multiple women, many of whom were young women, by engaging in unwanted groping, kisses, hugging, and by making inappropriate comments.
Cuomo tried to hold on, gave some weird slideshow press conferences, and then boom, he resigns, which is hilarious. Now he's running for mayor. But that's a whole different video for a whole different time.
I also want you to know that I have learned from what has been an incredibly difficult situation for me as well as other people. And I've learned an important lesson. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for whatever pain I caused anyone. I never intended it, and I will be the better for this experience.
That wasn't just a fall from grace, that was a public execution carried out by this very woman now asking us to ignore the smoke that was coming from her own office. Letitia James built her entire political brand off that moment. She went from AG to a national name because of that Cuomo report. She stood in front of the cameras and said, "No one is above the law." She wore the armor of justice like it was a custom tailored suit. But when the heat is in her own kitchen, when it's her own chief of staff being accused of the same type of predatory behavior, suddenly it's all about private investigation and wait for the process. That's not justice. That sounds like a cover-up. Because it's not just messy, it's calculated. She waited until the ballots came in, counted, and laminated before telling folks, oh, by the way, my chief of staff might be a predator. Just doing the thing that she had to do to serve herself, politically self-serving, in a very, I don't know, House of Cards type of way. Letitia James positioned herself as the voice for the victims, but when it came to her own house, she basically ghosted it while it was on fire.
Sophia Quintanar worked for Attorney General Tish James as a deputy press secretary until last year. She is speaking out tonight as both the victim of sexual harassment from James' Chief of Staff Ibrahim Khan and as a former employee who doesn't understand how her case was handled differently from the sexual harassment case brought by the office against former Governor Andrew Cuomo that forced him to resign. She charges that James took more care to protect Ibrahim Khan than the women who accused him of abuse. I find it just appalling to see how the office handled this publicly, Ms. Quintanar, 33, said in an interview with the New York Times.
So not only this happened under Letitia James' watch, but the person reporting this, Sophia, literally used to work for this person. Do you know how wild it is when your own team member says, hey, you treated Cuomo's accusers better than me? I worked for you. That's not just shady, that's betrayal. That's extreme betrayal. Sophia said it best. It shouldn't have been different because it happened in her own house, her own office. And she's 100% right. Justice doesn't take a smoke break because the creep has a key card to your office. James didn't fumble this. It was a strategy. She chose silence because she knew going public before election might mess up her vote count. She picked power over principle. As simple as that.
Me and the other victims, we deserve the same vindication that was given to those other victims that she stood up for. It shouldn't be any different because it happened in her house. Sophia Quintanar said she was referring to how Tish James protected the 11 women she claimed were victimized by Andrew Cuomo. She said Khan touched her inappropriately after a Brooklyn fundraiser and kissed her against her will. One of the problems for the Attorney General is that she didn't disclose the investigation of Khan until last week, even though the probe of the charges was going on while she sought re-election.
Ain't that about a bitch? He kissed her without consent at a fundraiser and you waited weeks to say anything? And we're not talking about a dude from the mailroom. This was your chief of staff, your number one, the guy in the meetings, the gatekeeper. You can't play the believe women card only when it's politically convenient. It seems like it's not about real feminism, it's about marketing, right? Because Letitia James is a far left progressive person. So the fact that she treated the victims of Cuomo way better than the victims of her own right-hand man, it shows a lot about who she is as a person. If Andrew Cuomo had done the exact same thing, Tish would have booked the press room at the Madison Square Garden.
And it wasn't until today that she offered a public defense of her actions, saying, quote, "My office treated this matter as aggressively as every other matter that has come before our office. Within 24 hours, our office took disciplinary action and put Ibrahim Khan under restrictions. And within 72 hours, we engaged an outside law firm that began an impartial and exhaustive review of the allegations. But the issue has continued to percolate, and there are demands for an outside probe of the case. Governor Hochul was asked if it was unethical to hide the case until after the election.
I'm not going to conjecture on what's on people's minds and what their motivations are. I'm simply saying that there's a lot of, the situation is not very clear.
Fantastic work, Governor. You can see that they're still pretty tight considering that her office, so the people in Albany, trying to sneak in $10 million to protect Letitia James as she is dealing with her own federal issues with the mortgage fraud situation. So you see, they're still pretty tight. So she let Khan resign quietly, like he just finished a shift at Olive Garden. Not like he was under active investigation for assault. She told the public nothing while asking for their vote. That's not justice, that's a con. An idea that the governor can't even critique her shows is the reason why we all hate politics, or at least I hate politics. That she can't even be honest and say, you know what, that probably was a bad idea. Letitia James should have publicly said something, or at least put him not on restriction. He should not have been going back to the office until a thorough investigation was done. Not necessarily saying you have to fire the guy, but he can't be still in the office after this kind of crazy accusations. And remember, you are going after the governor that was doing something that was happening right under your watch with this chief of staff doing what he was doing. The lack of self-awareness is astounding. If this happened to one of her political enemies, someone that she was looking to take down or distance herself from, she would have dragged him in front of every camera in New York. But when it's in her own circle, suddenly it's all hush-hush, and we're handling this internally. Because let's be honest, that corporate press release energy doesn't hit the same after you sat on that story for a very long time. It missed me with that we hired an outside firm spin, because what you didn't do was tell the public. You didn't tell the voters. You told us after re-election when the coast was clear and the headlines were low. That's not leadership, that's PR damage control. It's the political version of, oh, I meant to tell you this, but then I didn't. The whole thing was pretty embarrassing. I mean, even with Kathy Hochul hitting that political shrug, this whole situation says more about who Letitia James really is than any speech that she's ever given. She's not the people's champion. She's just another political player in the game. She covered for her guy. She covered her own back. And now she's under federal investigation for mortgage fraud. So she might want to sit out the next round of public takedowns. But we'll see about that. Let's be clear. Letitia James didn't just mess up. She exposed herself. You went after Trump for shady real estate deals, but now the feds are on your neck for a sketchy mortgage. You shamed Cuomo for being a complete creep for sexual misconduct. Cool. But you had a predator in your own office, allegedly, and you hit the snooze button. You are not the hero you advertised. You're just like the rest of them. You use justice when it's convenient, and you stay quiet when it's not. That's not reform. It's just rebranding, and we see through it, and that's why you're dealing with so many problems as is. But this was pretty shocking, and we're finding more things about Letitia James and her past and what she did. But let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. We are almost there at 100,000 subscribers. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button if you want to watch more of this type of content. Obviously, they got the Patreon there. You got the email newsletter if you're interested. All that will be in the links below. Thank you for taking time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.